that.
So, we're gonna like just hang out and chat about our brain meats.
Okay.
I don't, given that it's something we've talked about in the past. Um, um, Actually, could you say one more thing, Will?
Yeah. Like one more thing, Will.
Okay, I'm gonna raise your levels so that people can hear you better. Okay.
Maybe I can do that on my end too.
No, I I
Here
I
we go.
had a specific thing and I just juiced you up, so you should be way good now.
Okay. All right.
Um, so maybe I'll start and I'll say
Okay.
I started to tell this story when I was sort of introducing you were going to be on, and I was going to say one of the things that's been kind of important for me over the course of all, like figuring out some of my stuff, is the fact that years ago I can't even remember what I was doing. I think I might have wandered down some YouTube rabbit hole, and then eventually I think I ended up rewatching our Lords of Waterdeep tabletop, and then from there it was like, here's some other videos if you watch this one, and I clicked on another one, and you were talking about mental health, and you were talking about how something happened, and then you got on meds, and you were doing this thing, and you went outside, and you were just sort of talking about like how things started to get better and how things were bad, and I for the life of me I can't remember what specifically you were saying or what
It's the video
anecdote.
that I did for Project You Are Okay.
Is that where you had all the eyes on you?
Nope, that was for Project for Awesome a few years ago.
I think it might have been that video,
Okay.
and it was again. It was you were obviously doing something else, and you just segued into this other thing,
Yeah.
and I started to cry, and I'm like, why am I crying? What does this mean? Like, it was like sort of a tip off. It's like maybe what he's saying might be really important, and you might want to ask somebody what their opinion is about this.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been really helpful for me to see you talking about this stuff openly. Recently, it was just this year you were talking about using some CBD oil,
Uh-huh.
and that's absolutely like it nudged me over into giving it a try. And oh my lord, like what a thing. So there's a bunch of things I could talk about, but that's sort of by way of introducing Will. I mean, like you need an introduction. You've been so helpful to me, and just personally I want to say thank you so much for being outspoken, because it's like legit helped me like like think about this better and try things that I might not have tried. And like Lord knows where I'd be if I hadn't have gotten those timely nudges from you.
I'm really happy to know that. You know, the reason that I speak about this as often and as loudly and as relentlessly as I do is like I'm trying really hard to be the person I always needed in the world. I am coming to terms this year with the reality that like my parents were never really there for me the way that you need your parents to be there for you. And I have had to be the person I need as often as I can. And I'm really lucky to be married to Anne, who is so supportive and has made it possible for me to be my best self, or the best version of me that I can possibly be. And it was like what what made it okay for me to accept the reality that I have mental illness was hearing Jerry and Mike from Penny Arcade talk about their experience with anxiety and listening to Jenny Lawson talk about her experience with depression. And I remember very clearly thinking, if these people who I love and respect and admire are successful and they're living full, good lives in spite of mental illness, then I bet I could too. And that made it okay for me to accept that I have weird wiring in my brain. It wasn't helped by some neglect when I was younger, and I'm learning to deal with that. Um, but it helped me realize that I was suffering because of pride and
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah. Right.
Pride and fear.
That's
And that was like a thing that I realized was like my wife Anne deserves better than I can give her on my best day. And I'm never going to give her what she deserves. And I cannot believe that she's chosen to stay with me for 22 years. It doesn't make any sense to me. Um, and when she was like, you're suffering a lot, and I really want you to go see a person who can help you not suffer. That's what it took for me to like go, okay, I'm going to go. But it was Jenny and Jerry and Mike talking about it and not being ashamed that had created within me the ability to say yes when my wife was like, I'm worried about you. This needs to change. It's like when I decided to quit drinking, and my wife was like, I feel like you might be developing a problem with booze. I feel like you might be drinking too much, and it might be like a self medication issue. Would you look into that? And I was like, yeah, of course I will. And she was right. And like, not everybody has an Ann Wheaton in their lives.
right.
But if you're lucky enough to end up with somebody like Anne in your life, you do whatever it takes to earn and deserve that person because it's the best thing.
Having a friend or two who you trust and who trusts you and tells you like the real shit.
Yeah.
It's like worth more than gold, more than diamonds, more than any mortal treasure. I have a
And
friend.
also for people who are listening to this, who are seeing this, also it's important to remember the other half of that is you have the courage and the grace to listen to that person and to hear that person. And when, they say like when someone says like I'm so fucked up, I'm never going to get any better. I totally disagree with that. By having that thought, you are aware of something you want and need to change in yourself. And it's never easy. I've told my kids when they were little that like everything worth doing is hard. If things were easy, everyone would do them and it wouldn't matter. Like nobody gets excited because you took the trash cans out. Like that's easy. Everybody can do that, right? But like I'm proud of myself because today I cleaned up the entire house entirely by myself. It was hard, and I get credit for it.
I I keep joking about it. I will do something and then I'll tell somebody, I'm like, "Hey, I'm not saying I deserve a medal, but I kind of feel like I deserve a medal. Like I did something really hard today." And they're like not a medal but maybe a trophy. I'm like, I would settle for a sticker, honestly. Like
Sure,
give me
a
a
scratch and
little
sniff sticker.
little reinforcement, gold
Yeah,
star,
a
something.
gold star.
Um but I have a friend in my life and she said to me at one point, uh and this was just what you were talking about, is it's not enough to have a person that tells you the truth. You have to work on, and this is something Sarah, it's a term she would use, that I never understood. Um, she says, I'm working on my humility.
Mhm.
And I'm like, and I'm like, and honestly, I wasn't good at hearing what she meant. And because what I thought inside was like, yeah, I don't, well, what fucking good is humility? You know, but what she meant is if you have too much of this pride, it stands in the way of you listening when somebody tells you that something bad is going on with you. And so this friend said to me, you're a bit of an emotional vampire. And now, hearing something like that from someone, that you trust is sort of like, it's easy to be like, like you can get defensive, you can get angry, you can be afraid, you can be prideful. There's so many reasonable, socially acceptable ways to respond badly to something that is pretty negative, no matter how you're
Yeah.
going to parse that. Luckily, I like this person a lot and I trust them a lot, and they're really smart and they've helped me through a lot of things. And so when she said that, I went, huh, thank you for saying that. Would you like to unpack that a little? That's a great chamber up that phrase
Yeah.
in your head gun. I don't know what the fuck that analogy was, but like, get that ready. And so when somebody says something to you that you don't like, you say, "Huh, that's interesting. Would you care to unpack that a little bit with me to find out what they really mean?" And what was interesting is she almost immediately said, "No, no, 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 wait. I want to walk that back. It's not that you're a vampire, because like a social vampire just like takes from people."
Hmm.
And she says, "You sort of require a lot of 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 work, like sometimes in
Hmm.
some of these interactions." She goes, "You expect a lot, but you also give a lot. You're all the way in, and you expect the other person to be all the way in. And sometimes that's just a lot."
Yeah.
And so we talked about that, and I'm like, okay, so we got to what she really meant, and she was absolutely right, and I recognized it consciously, and I learned how she felt about it, and I realized that for a lot of people, they are not all chips in people,
Hmm.
which is a super helpful thing to realize, that however naturally your behavior comes to you, it's not necessarily how everyone else behaves. And for a lot of people, like if I like someone, and I get like friend crushes on them. And so I,
Hmm.
I meet them and I'm into them, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Now we're gonna live in my tree fort and we're gonna be best friends. And that's a little much for people.
Right.
So that was like a really great conversation that absolutely could not have happened if, through like 5 years of therapy, I trained myself up into listening when somebody said something about me that could be a little hard to chew up and swallow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that we have to be able, and another component of that is we have to develop the skill to separate someone who is being helpful from someone who is being hurtful.
right.
And we have to develop the skills to identify gaslighting from people who are being harmful under the guise of being helpful.
Yeah.
I posted a thing on Facebook about that yesterday, or maybe it was day before yesterday. It's people that you should be wary of. And it's, I'm 46, I'll be 47 in July, and I wish I had figured a lot of this stuff out when I was younger, because I
Right.
feel because I feel like shit, man, my life is halfway over. Like I wasted half of it. Um, and one of the ways that I feel like it wasn't a waste is by sharing as non-confrontationally, as easily, as gently. Gentle is the word I'm looking for. Sharing as gently as I can what I have figured out over my time, so that a younger version of me can hear it and maybe get 10 years that I didn't get.
That's exactly it. The first day I went into therapy, and it was couples therapy. I went into couples therapy, and you know, I had been, um, and I'm like, I was fine with couples therapy. I'm not that kind of guy. I'll go into therapy. Went into therapy. I go, and I'll fess up to this because it was some bullshit behavior, and I'll cop to it. I was mostly going into couples therapy because I thought Sarah could use some therapy, which is
Uh-huh.
some bullshit, right? And so I'm going to own that. And so we went in, and I'm like, okay, let's do this. and they start talking and they start, saying, well, here's a good trick and here's a good tip and have you considered this and have you whatever. And I was like, I remember 15 minutes in, I thought, motherfucker, why didn't I come see a therapist 10 years ago?
I wrote a thing on one of my blogs where or it's in my speech that I gave to NAMI, which is still pretty popular on Medium, where I just reminded people who were listening that there's nothing to be embarrassed about, and there's nothing to be ashamed of when you reach out to a person who has dedicated their life to helping you.
Right.
Like, that's so important to remember. Like, and I think that at least in Western culture and Western male culture, it is so ingrained in us that help equals weakness when it doesn't.
Oh,
Like you don't go like look at your car. It's so incredibly complicated. Like my wife could take apart her 67 Mustang and put it back together with her hands and a wrench and everything was fine. She is a genius with cars. She can't figure out the engine in our Mini Coopers now. We have to go to a person who has been to school and who has passed tests and who is constantly in training to be able to take care of it. And that's just for a stupid car.
right, right.
It's not our brains. It's not our lives. It's not our ability to be parents or partners or bosses or any of the things that actually really matter in life. And it's such a simple, obvious thing, and it feels dumb to me to say it. Like, yeah, there's no reason we should feel ashamed when we ask for help. Like, the person you're seeing went to school for 8 years minimum
and
to learn specifically how to help you.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I thought. Is I'm like, oh shit. And here's the worst part of it. I was going to become a clinical psychologist at some point. That was one of my open career paths. I was the person everyone came to for advice. I took a ton of psychology. And then I had my eye on that 400 level class where you go and you start learning the practical application of talking to people about this stuff. And I was 10, 15, 20 minutes into that first session, I was like, oh, duh. This isn't some person who's gonna give me some hot cocoa and a hug so I feel good. This person is a professional. It's like if I had a pain in my body, I would go to a doctor who has learned how to deal with pains in the body. It's like my arm, it doesn't do arm things anymore. I go to an arm doctor. But if your head doesn't do head things right, why the fuck would you not go to a professional head doer? And you're right. It has to deal with if you're older, if you're a guy. And I will say, not that anyone has it easy, but if you're on one of the coasts, there's at least a culture of therapy, like New York, LA, or Seattle. Whereas in here in central Wisconsin, I will say 80% of all people in Wisconsin are no more than 3 generations removed from small family farms.
Right.
And self-reliance is so absolutely a part of our culture and mindset that the thought it doesn't even bear mentioning, which means it's invisible, which means it's poisonous as carbon monoxide. It's there and it fucking will kill you. Because if you get up, it's like, hey, you're a farmer? How do you feel today? Guess what? It doesn't matter. Milk the goddamn cows. And it's like, oh, it's late at night. Guess what? There's a frost. Get out there or you will starve to death in 8 months. And that was helpful in this agrarian time period where, yes, you needed to do this behavior or you would legit die from hunger or whatever. But that adaptive behavior has carried forward into this culture to the point where I would look at myself and I'm like, I've got money. I've got beautiful children. I have this good life. I am crazy successful. And I would say, why aren't I happy? What's wrong with me?
I had those conversations with myself too.
And it just, but that's where mine stopped. And I'm like, God, something's really, and that was it. I gotta,
Hmm.
you know, for years and years. So here's a question.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have started with this. Um, and I can lead off my thing, and it took me a while in therapy to figure out what it is. Um, I have cyclothalmia, which means it's a version of the manic depression or the bipolar disorder, where I
Hmm.
go a little too high up, I go a little bit too low down. One of the reasons I probably didn't identify it as a problem with me is I have had some friends with major depressive disorder who, like, my friend, he could not get out of bed, would not get days and days. Like, if we didn't bring food into his room, he would simply not eat. And so you look at that and you're like, oh boy, depression is a thing and it's real bad. And then I'm like, well, what I have isn't that. And so I talked myself out of it. Um, I've got I've got that. Um, this year, I also think that I've started to develop a generalized anxiety disorder. And here's the thing, it's this year that I realized I've been thinking about all of this wrong, because when I got pinned with cyclothalmia, I'm like, oh, I've always been a little up and down. I just
Yeah.
didn't know there was a word for it. And it's kind of been exacerbated because of my situation. It's not tenable anymore. It, honest to God, never occurred to me that you could develop a new mood disorder, a new
Sure.
anything. And and so I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel this way all the time? And then I read Mary Robinette Kowal's Calculating Stars,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and it, and I'm like, oh shit, you can effectively catch a new, like, mental disorder
Yeah.
because you've, like, eaten the wrong sort of shit at the wrong point in your life when you're not ready for it. Now, of course, I knew about post traumatic stress disorder, but it never, like, that's in the fucking name. It never occurred to me that, like, I was developing generalized anxiety because I had never had anxiety before in my life and I didn't think you could get new ones.
Hmm.
Guess what, everyone? Sometimes things are real bad and it hits you in the wrong way, and you get a new thing. And it sucks, but it sucks way more to not know it, so you can't get it fixed. It's like, imagine running a fever for the next 4 years of your life, and you feel like ass all the time, but you don't know how to take aspirin.
I
Um,
had I had panic attacks my whole life. I had them every night for my whole life. I would start to fall asleep and I would wake up in abject terror. It happened every night. I dreaded going to sleep. And it contributed significantly to I have so my clinical diagnosis is chronic major depression and generalized anxiety disorder. I don't talk about the medications specifically that I take because I don't want to influence people who may go to their doctors and then say, I want this because I heard this guy talking about it. I take two different medications and they work extraordinarily well for me and they help my brain process neurochemicals in a way that a healthy brain apparently processes neurochemicals. So that's how I take care of myself medically, right? So I had these panic attacks and I didn't know what they were. And when I was a kid, I would ask my parents, like, what's wrong with me? And they didn't know and couldn't tell me. And I remember being in my 20s and driving across town to go to my parents' house because I'd woken up in the middle of the night with one of these panic attacks and crying and begging my mom to help me. And my mom, all she could tell me was, maybe you're just becoming aware of how crazy and unsafe the world is. And I was like,
oh,
and she was trying to be helpful.
trying to help, right?
And I was like, yeah, I already know that. And then about 5 years ago, I feel like it was around 5 years ago. I was reading something at NAMI's website, and it described the panic attacks that I had, and it described the disorder. And because I knew, then I knew that's what it was. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that it was a panic attack. I didn't know that it was getting me when I was asleep. I had them when I was awake, but I didn't know that I was having them when I was asleep. I just thought I was having like nightmares or night terrors. And I learned what it was, and I have not had one since because I knew what it was. So I was able to like protect myself.
Yeah.
I was able to I was like, oh, I know what's going on. I can go see my therapist and talk out what the underlying cause of these panic attacks is and figure it out. And in a way, it was my unconscious self trying to communicate to me for what, 41 years that I have this thing going on that I need to take care of.
The I will echo that. Honestly, to go into the very near past for me, it was like 10 days ago. I was I was having a real problem, and I was a jittery mess, and I was angry and at everyone, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I was kind of unpacking it to a friend, and she's like, "Well, you're kind of under a lot of stress right now." I'm like, "When am I not under stress?" And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, you've got the fundraiser coming up, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but you know, the fundraisers. I've been through this before. It's 10 times, right?" And she's like, "But it's different this year, right? And they're changing the format, right? And you've been through a lot of shit this year, right?" And then I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, and then I remembered back, and I thought, "Oh God, I do this every year right before the fundraiser, because I feel all the responsibility, and I start feeling like I have less and less control
Mm-hmm.
because I don't run everything myself anymore." And it's the same thing that I realized in that moment 10 days ago, that it's the same thing that happens for about an hour and a half before I leave on any trip. I
Me too.
Really?
Yeah.
Because like I get mostly packed, and then tell me if you do this too, because I'm so ashamed of it. I'm like getting ready for a trip, and I get stressed out, and I'm like, why isn't anyone helping me? Like, can't it doesn't anyone give a shit about me? Why can't somebody help me get ready for this trip? I need some help. And then they try to help, and I'm like, not that help. Good help.
No, I don't do that.
I do, and
I
it's
don't do
super
that.
shitty.
I'm glad I don't do that.
Oh, be consider that your Christmas gift to everyone in your life. Hey, everyone, if you do that, don't. It's shitty, and it makes you a shitty person. By the way, everyone in my life, hey, I'm sorry for all of that all the time. Um, and it is, and I realized I was doing that thing that happens if I'm not ready for a trip and I'm feeling stressed, and it's gotten on top of me. Um, I was doing that, except it was bigger, and it was lasting about 4 days right before the fundraiser, because the fundraiser was looming over me like this tidal wave. Um, and Yeah, I'll also say I've dealt with versions of depression, and like only recently have I had a word for it. Back in high school, I literally called it my Hamlet mood. Um,
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, man delight's not me, nor woman neither, nor fucking nothing. Everything is shit. And I would go through my day, but like nothing would sound good. What do you want to do? Not reading my favorite book, not eating my favorite food, not spending time with my friends. Nothing would sound good. And it was just like an empty eggshell, you know. And that sucked, but the way in which it has gotten bigger at various points later in my life has been much worse than that. Because honestly, back in high school, I kind of reveled in it, and I
Yeah,
was like,
sure. I mean, we had the Smiths.
I would
I
wear
think
all
and
black and
at
feel,
Pining.
yeah, and also although they've shown, and this is interesting, I at that point, um, I felt, um, I also felt I'm like, well, sometimes I feel real great, and
Uh-huh.
this is me kind of coming down and I'm recharging, and then I'll feel real great again later. And there's been studies just recently in these last couple of years showing how people think about their down times. If they view it as part of a natural and or healthy cycle, it tends to affect them less and they get over it faster.
It took me years to figure out that after I've been at a convention for a weekend, whether it's a convention I'm at because it's part of my job or it's a convention that I went to because I wanted to be there, like just because I'm a nerd, I need Monday and Tuesday after the con to not have any unwanted or forced interactions with humans. And since I started giving myself permission to take those times off, and to view it as practicing self-care,
Yeah.
because like I you know I still have this, I still live with a little bit of an imposter syndrome, and I still live with this with like freelancer syndrome, and I still live with the fear that it's all going to go away like at any second, and I still live with the fear that like the mysterious they are going to figure it all out and I'm fucked. And like um I always felt like if I took time for myself, that I wasn't working and I was slowing down and that I couldn't do that. And that, my wife works really hard all the time. And I'm telling my kids not to just sit on the couch and not do anything. And what kind of behavior am I modeling? And I was thinking about all of that stuff. And like, it's okay. And I'm saying this because like I am hopeful that there are people who have tuned into this particular stream because they are in the super fun happy brain club with us, and and might want and might benefit from just some validation that like what you are going through is not unique to you, which means you don't have to try to solve it because it's not specific to you. Like it's a thing that a lot of us kind of go through and a lot of us kind of deal with. And we like we have to give ourselves permission to carve out time for ourselves and just take care of ourselves. And I have started doing I practice this thing. You were talking about, how you want at least a gold star, which I think is entirely appropriate, right? When I do a thing that I'm proud of, and it doesn't matter what it is, it can like start with something stupid and little and meaningless, like I put this can in the recycling instead of dumping it in the trash can in my office because that was less of a hassle to get up and walk. Or a bigger thing, like I went out for a walk today, even though I'm feeling super depressed and I wasn't motivated to do it. And that's a big spectrum. It's a huge spectrum in between those two extremes, right? But when you do a thing, I think you give yourself credit for it. And you talk to yourself. This is what I do. Talk to myself the way I talk to my dogs, the way that I talk to my nephew, the way that I talked to my kids when they were little. We need to use an inner voice that is the same as the outer voice we use with the people we love more than anyone else in the whole world. We
God.
deserve to treat ourselves with the love and compassion and patience and care that we give the most important person in our lives. And my God, Pat, it took me forever to realize because I didn't get it from my parents. It took me the majority of my life to figure out that it was okay for me to give that to myself. And it's as simple as just going like that was a great idea. Good job, Wheaton. Way to go. And then I'm like, thanks me. And it seems so silly.
No, like,
But like,
let,
I say that and I can feel the eyes rolling out there,
no,
right? But nobody rolls their eyes when you're like, you moron, that was a dumb thing to do. Because it's the way we talk to ourselves all the time.
yep.
It's okay to treat yourself with the love and compassion and gentleness that you would give your infant child. Like that's and I would say that like it falls under that heading of put on your own mask before you assist another passenger.
Yeah.
You have to take care of yourself that way so that you can open yourself to someone who needs you, so that you can be there, so that you can be for someone else the person you needed at that moment of darkness and hopelessness or despair or just sadness.
Somebody here in the chat had a great one. He said, look at yourself the way your dogs look at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great rule of thumb.
I 100% agree with that. I wanted to riff off of something that you were kind of talking around and didn't and it just made me think of a thing. You're talking about how before travel you get stressed and before the fundraiser you get stressed and the way that I imagine that is it's like a clock spring getting
Oh,
tighter,
yeah.
tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. Um, I I think that trigger warnings are really appropriate and really important and really helpful. And it bothers me that they're mocked and viewed as a sign of weakness. If you are a person who has been traumatized by an event or series of events, being reminded of that is real painful. And like my trauma is my trauma and it's bad in its own way. And I'm not going to play trauma Olympics with other people and like see who has it the worst. But there are things that I don't want to hear. And there are things that I don't want to see because it's real upsetting to me because I'm working all the time to not let those past traumas define me and control me. And when someone throws one of those things up in my face, it's one of the many reasons I have such a hard time with Trump because I
Yeah.
feel like, oh, it's every abusive person I've ever interacted with in my life. It's every shitty gaslighting abuser I've ever dealt with. And I'm a dude.
Right. Right.
Like
And we've
it's
got it so easy.
my friends who are women have it so much worse. And like I know the people watching and listening to this don't need to hear it, but the world needs to hear it. We got to work on our empathy.
Yeah.
We have to work on our ability to be compassionate for people who are suffering and do what we can to move the world in a direction that lessens that suffering. Like you were talking about how people are not that far removed from if you don't get out and if you don't bring your livestock in before this frost hits, you're fucked. Like it's like we're real lucky. We're living in the 21st century right now. We don't have to worry about that. And one of the reasons we don't have to worry about that is the people who lived before us worked to develop automation and worked to develop weather forecasting and worked to develop these things to change the world so that the farmers of today do not have to do the same thing that the farmers of 3 generations ago had to do. We have this ability, we have the privilege as celebrities, as rich dudes living life on the lowest difficulty setting. We have this tremendous, incredible ability to start laying the groundwork to move the way people think about mental health. Like it's a privilege and it's a responsibility and honestly, it's an insult to the universe if we don't use that to try to make these changes because the world doesn't just happen. It's what we choose to do with ourselves and it's what we choose to do as a community and it's what we choose to do as a family and it's what we choose to do as individuals. And I think it's real important for all of you who are watching this. I think it's really important for you to be as open as you are comfortable being about your mental health. and make it normal. And especially with younger people, you know, like if you think about things we completely take for granted right now. Like I have a friend who grew up in Germany before unification,
Right.
and that's an incredible experience for him. And my kids have never known a non-unified Germany. It does. It's academic to them, right? Wouldn't it be amazing if we moved the world to a place where shame associated with mental health is something that is looked back on academically and is looked on the way we look on like someone who look at the way that we look at people who are like
Used to
if,
practice the humors in terms of medicine.
exactly, yeah, like, well, we better, better drill a hole in that skull to release, or whatever. Like we can do that. We can start doing that now. There's enough of us, and enough of us are parents. We're really the first generation that can just go, I flat out refuse to be stigmatized. I flat out reject the notion that I'm less than someone who doesn't have a mental illness. And I think it is incredibly important to be out about it.
Yeah.
And it will take time, but we can move that by the time your kids are in college, that it's normal. That mental health care is as normal and as integral a part of our lives as physical health care.
I've taken one step. I try to talk with my boys really, about this, and I'm like, how are your feelings doing today? Um, um, and they both can get tantrumy because they're young,
Yeah,
and we've implemented a process where we're like, it's not okay to freak out. We have rules. It's not okay
yeah,
to freak out. It's okay to have feelings, but what you do then is kind of your choice, with very rare exceptions. Like if you have legitimate emotional overflow, you kind of, that's a foul ball. It's not really your responsibility.
yeah,
But if it becomes persistent, you need to learn how to head that off at the pass. And so I've actually managed to implement it with the boys, instead of getting upset, instead of freaking out. Um, they will say, they will say, I'm having a lot of feelings right now, because expecting them to
great.
articulate,
Yes,
they don't know what their feelings are, but there are a lot of them right now, and I'm having
yeah,
them right now. And like, I'm going to do some shit if you don't help me with these feelings. And then I'm like, great. You have, like, let's go sit down. What are these feelings? Where are
yeah,
they coming from? And then it's such a great little trick, because if they say, I'm having a lot of feelings, we can have a talk. If they're just, and then they freak out and they behave really badly, I do have to, those really bad behaviors will have consequences. You still can't hit
yeah,
anyone. You still can't
yeah.
throw something at your brother. You still can't say certain things because that is not acceptable. You can't be a good human and behave that way. So what I'm going to do, this is such a great conversation. I knew it was going to be great, but I didn't expect it to be this great. Do you have a hard out at the top of the hour, Will?
Um, I I don't have a hard out, but close-ish
Could I,
to it.
could I, could
Because
I,
I told Anne that we would probably be done about 5, and I'd be able to help with dinner. But I can probably go if there are questions from the room. Maybe we can go. Maybe I can. I'm happy to go a little bit longer.
if we could have maybe, hey, Anne.
There's no rush.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
I'm just going to tell you right now that I am mortified that he left this mess right here that you can see.
I love it because it makes me feel better about like.
So my office is our guest room, and our son Nolan is staying with us, and he sleeps in here. And I forgot to do that
It's a
before I
mess.
started.
I love the fact that you consider that a mess. If I tilted this camera, you would see this horrible hellscape of the place in which I live.
I feel like it needs to be. It feels like an oatmeal comic, right, or an XKCD of like the small area that you clean up to look normal, and then everything else where it just it's on fire.
Yes.
It's the dog. It's the It's Fine dog. It's just
Yeah.
like right off to the side.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have like 4 feet behind you that's super organized. Same for Will. I mean, he did clean up stuff on the floor, but it's just good that the camera's not pointing over here because there's.
Dude, come on.
I mean, it's so organized. Have a great talk.
So I wanted to ask you about a thing.
Actually, real quick, before we start a new thing,
Yeah.
I'm going to take a brief, I don't want to call it a commercial break, but I do want to mention the charity real quick
Yeah, go.
in between this and us doing a tiny bit more talk.
Okay.
For everyone that's showing up, welcome, thank you. I hope that you're hearing things that maybe ring a bit of a bell in you or might be helpful for you or a friend. We will be archiving this video, so it'll be available later if you came in partway through. One of the things that we're doing here, or the reason we're doing this, is to help people and to normalize the concept that, you know, mental health and self-care are things that should be talked about. But also, I am in the middle of a charity fundraiser where we are looking to help people have better lives and help them screw up their camera so that it doesn't show up when you switch your OBS overlay. This is funny to everyone on the stream, Will. Trust me, because I'm trying to show them.
Listen, I know the pain of OBS overlays. I know all about that. Talking to a guy who's been trying to get Mix to communicate to a Shoutcast server in Linux for the last 10 days.
Oh no!
And it's anyway. I understand your frustration.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. This is briefly. This is Worldbuilders, what you see on your screen now. This is a charity I started about 10 years ago. This is our 10th anniversary. And right now, after a weekend, we have raised $547,000, and we're going for one more week. If you come in, you can donate. And what Worldbuilders does is we take this money, we pass 100% of it along to Heifer International, which is a charity that does work all over the world and that improves people's lives and gives them the chance to have sustainable, reliable improvement that they are in control of, specifically in terms of their food reliability. So I'm going to go back to one of my favorite videos that really says it better and more quickly than I can my own self. And it talks about
the end.
It talks about what a goat can do for a family.
Tuita abalimi bambushi. Tuita abalimi bambushi pantu ekitupera fensi. Umi wandi kwera na buchinja. Pantu kale twaleta mbika kubana mpeni ko ya sopo mpeni ko ya fertilizer. Inena shireba fama wa mbushi. Shadi polo bapukira banandi mbushi. Tali kulusaka ati seni wangu kuti abalepere mbushi. Ila na mfuire fyo ina mwere kwati mufi barebe pafi. Sanomba nera twapokelele mbushi twamwere kwati bale tube pafi pantu nchi twale bombe akoza sana. Bale tuseka banenzi tamwa akapokea mbushi mulebe pafi. Kulinga davana bana bajondo bene 01 baisa ndamulala mayo bukendi. Ila napokelele mbushi ba meode yo elo nishinindi wala na BP. Shale ile bushikubuza. Kwene tulale bwino sana pantu nangu twabulirwa twabula kufika mwaka ushtu shitisha sali yonse munganda saladi nomba tayibula fila twalibula saladi sugar munganda tayibula tula shita kwena ndimtu achawe flower direpanga ko tumbwa vilya sana kashukuru kandikala kende ndakalipila kusukulu nensapata kafala febata shunomba kashukuru kandi mfwaka kasambile kakeka libwino nishisha ateke mushi nale mna kwati ndia fidangu so nomba ino nshita chemfiko muchinshi.
Okay, I'm not I'm not quite crying, so I'm going to count that as a big win. So I'm going to hop back over and just say, so that's what Heifer International does. There's a woman who she used to have to beg for soap for her family. She was literally a beggar. Her children were hungry. Heifer came in. They taught her how to build a pen for a goat, how to raise food for a goat, how to take care of a goat, and then they gave her a goat. And that goat had milk for her children. She could sell the extra milk to make money, and then she had money and food, and then more goats, because goats make goats like nobody's business. And then her, now as a grandmother, she has a house, she has resources, she has money, and she has the ability to send her granddaughter to school. Imagine what it is like to go from having to beg for your children to living in prosperity, where you have resources you can use to control your life, to feed not just your children, but your grandchildren. Again, you saw all those goats in that video. Heifer didn't give her a dozen goats. She learned animal husbandry. She learned how to breed goats and have more goats. And then if she needs money, she can sell a goat. And what makes this even better is that her community now has access to more fresh food. She gets money, everybody else gets fresh milk. Heifer does this in dozens of countries, like more than 30 countries all over the world. And they don't just do it with livestock. Sometimes it's chickens or it's tree seedlings. And tree seedlings prevent soil erosion. They improve crop yields. They have like fruit and nuts, which are very nutritionally dense foods and also are great cash crops. So again, money and food sustainability. Once Heifer sets these people up, they are good forever. And then Heifer teaches these people to teach other people these techniques. And then these other people, their lives get better too. In certain areas of Nepal, whole villages of women get together and go to a new village, train that village's women about goats, and then there's a huge ceremony. They go in and give away 100 goats to all the women in that village. And then they do that a couple of times, and then they go to a nearby village, and then they start a dairy. So there's industry, there's agriculture. I wouldn't waste your time with a shitty charity, folks. $120 will buy someone the training, education, and tools to have a goat, and it will change their lives forever. A child will go to sleep like not hungry, feeling safe. The parents will not have to live in fear and constant worry about what they will do for work. $30 buys honeybees, which will double the crop yield of a farm and provide honey and wax that is a cash crop. $20 is a flock of chickens, and eggs are full of wonderful protein. Also, they make more chickens. It's not a complex system. And here's the cherry on top. You come in, you donate, and we're giving away $170,000 worth of stuff, books and games. Will, we've got one of those beautiful new wormwood tables.
Oh, cool.
They gave us like a black walnut table
Awesome.
that they will deliver and set up at the person's house. For every $10 you kick into the charity, people will, you have a chance to win this and so many other things. And here's the last thing I'll mention, just because it's relevant here. And I'm going to bring this up onto the screen to share. Down here on this particular team page, the D&D team page, we're giving away one-off items, little tickets that you can use at your gaming table. We have the entirety of Critical Role here, you see. Let us make character or cards from each of the characters, the cast of Critical Role. We have everything from Acquisitions Incorporated. Oh, look, here we have a new graphic, everybody. Here's my card, which is you're cordially invited to engage in Pat Rothfuss bullshit at the table. Oh, have you not seen that yet, Will?
It just reminds me of when we played Baron Munchausen together, and I got to watch you engage in Pat Rothfuss bullshit like firsthand, and we were all so gobsmacked and just like enraptured that like everybody else stopped playing the game and just listened to you.
And also, here we have some initial mock-ups of the card that Will has pitched for this, which I love. I had a couple of ideas, but I loved his so much more. It's Don't Be a Dick. And here you see the text is, Wil Wheaton says, don't be a dick. And the player, DM, or NPC who is presented with this card must stop being a dick. The card becomes the property of the person that it was presented to. So if you're doing some tabletop RPG and you're playing with a friend, and that friend is like engaging in some manner of dickery in the game, you can hand this to them and say, listen, I know that your thief is going to like go into this room and clean it out, and nobody else in the party is going to get any treasure before we get into town. I'm giving you this card. Don't be a dick right now. And to take the sting off of that, here's the card. And then that player will get to use that card later. We're going to be giving away hundreds of these cards. If you come and you donate on this team page, you'll win these for Critical Role, Acquisitions Incorporated, Mike Merles, Jeremy Crawford, Chris Perkins. They're all doing their own cards. Oh, Will, Mike Merles' card is you get to be GM for 1 minute.
Amazing.
And then you have to make your choices, because at the end of that minute, you are no longer the GM.
Sure.
And so, like, make your choices.
That's great.
So if you donate on this page, you can win all these cards or sets of these cards, as well as you're entered into all the other lottery options as well. The Wormwood Table, the balcony cabin on the Joko Cruise, thousands of books and games. But let's not lose sight of the fact that if you cough up $60 into this fundraiser, you're not just getting 6 chances to win everything. You are changing somebody's life forever, for real. You will make some family self-reliant forever. And I tell you, if you're not feeling great right now, it's a great way to feel better.
I cannot overstate how true that is.
Yeah.
I've been waiting to share.
Jump in.
That like when I am having a bad day, when I am feeling sad, when I'm feeling like worthless, and I'm feeling like my 15 minutes are up, there are 3 charities that I go to, and Worldbuilders is one of them.
Oh.
And I give, and I always feel better. Every single time. It feels so good. I went to Donors Choose, and I completed like 5 projects that all needed like $50. And I got letters from little kids.
Oh.
I loaned about $1,000 on Kiva through the Nerdfighters group, and I just got repaid a ton of my loans, and I relent them immediately. And I relent them to people who were like, they're $25 away from having the thing that they needed. And a jeweler I support at Kiva made a ring that I bought for Anne for our anniversary.
Oh.
So it kind of came like full circle. It all pales to the feeling of like clicking, yes, I want to send this to Worldbuilders, and knowing like that video shows, and like you were saying, when you give someone a goat, you give their children and their grandchildren a better life. I mean, think about like We who are lucky enough to live in the first world, we can like save up our money and then it's discretionary spending, right? Like we could skip our lattes for a week or whatever. And like for us, that is a sacrifice. Okay. I acknowledge the sacrifice that you make by not doing that. But we have the privilege of just taking some of our money. We don't even have to do anything. You don't even have to get up. All you have to do is type in some numbers and work it into your budget. And you have made someone's life better. You have made the difference between I am going to bed not knowing where my next meal is coming from and I'm going to bed in a home. It's amazing. I cannot oversell how good it feels. There's nothing in the world like it. And for parents, when you do this with your children, when you make your children part of the process, when you bring them in and you show them the person you're helping and you show them what you're doing and then you share the updates with them and what they've done, you're empowering your children to do things that are bigger than them. And it's an indescribable feeling. It is, the world sucks right now. Yeah. And it's a small thing, man. But it's a small thing for us, but it is everything to the people who are being helped.
Yeah.
And like part of my self-care, I am lucky, I am privileged, I am grateful that I can do this. Part of my self-care is giving some of like, I don't want to just sit around and accumulate wealth. I want to do something with what I have. And a huge part of my self-care is giving to people who are going to benefit so far out of proportion to what I have to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I do when I'm putting together the blogs or whatever, I sometimes go and I look at like the pictures because they'll show, and one of my favorites is, and it's really hard for us to actually comprehend what it is like for some of these people in their lives. Because, I mean, I have been hungry, I have been broke, but being broke as a student in America is different from other types of genuine poverty, which isn't to say that was easy for me. I'm just saying whole different game, whole different thing. And there's this picture of a kid, because one of the things Heifer does also is like promote like clean water and good water management. They go and teach them techniques for irrigation and so and have better access to water. And there's this picture of this kid who's working like a treadle pump, which is a pump like Heifer goes in and teaches this old technology so that if that pump breaks, the people can fix it because it is sticks and wood. They always will have the material to fix and be in control of this this water technology themselves. And you see this kid and he's got this container and there's water going into it. And he's like, can you fucking believe this? He's like, I had to walk 4 goddamn miles to bring, and this water is fucking heavy. And then I had to come back with it before, and that water was out of a river, and you don't want to drink that water. You got to boil it then. That means I have to go collect wood and then start a fire in my house, and it's exhausting. Or now we have this technology, this training, this help, and we can maintain it ourselves. And this little kid gets 4 hours of his life back and cleaner water. And in that 4 hours, that kid can go to school, and people's gardens produce more and they stay healthier. And again, everything that Heifer does is so synergistic, so multiplicative. And one of the books that I read to my boys is called Beatrice's Goat. And it's this little girl and her mom says, you know, we're going to get a lucky gift. We're going to get a goat. And the girl is like, who gives a shit? Is a goat going to help take care of my little brother? Is a goat, you know, going to like fix our leaky roof? I'm cold. Is a goat going to get me a blanket? And the mother's like, just like, let's see. And then she
Actually, yes.
Actually, yes. That's a spoiler alert. That's the end of the story. And what it is it shows her taking care of the goat and then milking the goat. And then she would have the extra milk and she would sell the milk. And then all these coins go into a cup. And then she's like, oh man, like, what are we going to, and she's thinking, she's dreaming, what are we going to do with this money? You know, like, are we going to get some tin for the roof? Are we going to get like, you know, like, what are we going to buy? And then she goes to her mom at the end, and I'm going to cry on the stream right now. And she says, well, with this money, we can buy you an outfit and we can buy you books. And now you get to go to school. Because Beatrice had always like, she'd wanted to, but you need money to go to school. And it's not a lot of money, but any money was more money than they had. And so at the end of this goat and the fact that she took care of the goat, you know, and she milked the goat and she sold the milk and then she had the money and she gets to go to school. And I read this book to my boys, and now my boys, like, I gotta tell you, my older Oot, he is on a rampage for cows. He will not shut up. He shook down people at my dad's funeral for heifer international donations. It was
amazing.
It was pretty great. I'm not gonna lie. I put a stop to it because I'm like, hey, good hustle, my boy. Maybe stop selling the funeral mints to everyone here.
I mean, but he's on the move though. He's going to be a made man like real soon.
I only knew what was going on. He came up to me with a handful of change and a check made out to Worldbuilders for $50 because he had explained to somebody how cows, you could take the manure and then people use that. And then there's milk and people can make cheese and da-da-da-da. And I'm like, good hustle, my man. Good hustle.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So I've kept you late. Are you willing to do, I swear, 10 minutes of quick Q&A or some tips? There was one thing you wanted to hit right before we cut out. Do you remember what that was?
I wanted to ask you if your kids use the color zone system that my godson uses.
I don't know about that.
My godson is 6. He and my sister and her husband, they live in Minnesota, and he has this thing where there are different color zones that correspond to what he is experiencing emotionally. When you're in the green zone, you're feeling good. Everything's cool. You're relaxed. When you're in the blue zone, you feel down. You feel sad. Maybe you feel tired, or you just feel sort of down. When you're in the yellow zone, you're on your way to the red zone where you don't want to be. When you're in the red zone, you're mad. And when you're in the yellow zone, you're on your way to the red zone. It has enabled my 6-year-old nephew to express in a way that is empowering and is understandable and is age appropriate what he is feeling and where he's at emotionally in a moment. So we were playing the Ticket to Ride for kids. I think it's called My First Ticket to Ride or something like that. And he and I were on a team, and my sister and my wife were on a team. And he and I just, shocking, in a game where you have to draw things, I wasn't drawing the things that I need. So I'm drawing cards, and we're not getting the cards that I need. And he gets up from the table, and he walks away from the table. And I said, buddy, what's wrong? And he said, I'm starting to be in the yellow zone, and I don't want to be in the red zone. And I said, okay, let's talk about why you feel the yellow zone. and he expressed how he was feeling frustrated and it wasn't going the way that he wanted it to go. And I said, all right, well, let's see if we can move back into the green zone. You know how fun it is when things are just going your way and all that? And he was like, yeah. And I said, well, if we weren't experiencing it not going our way, we wouldn't know how great it is when it does go our way. So this is actually kind of cool because it's helping us really enjoy it when it's great. And he was like, I guess. and I said, and here's another thing though. Mom and Auntie Anne are doing really well right now. You know how good it feels when you're doing really well? Isn't it wonderful that they get to feel that too? And when he understood that they were getting to feel a good thing that he loved to feel, he was able to let go of feeling competitive, and he was able to not be as disempowered and as frustrated as he was. And he was able to communicate to us at 6 years old where he was using this common language that we as adults are able to interpret and he as a child was able to express. And it's amazing. And I wish that I had had it when I was a kid, and I wish that my kids had had it. And it's a thing that I want to track down the source of so that I can share it, because I'm sure there's more to it than what he communicated to me. But it was this wonderful way for his emotions and his feelings to be validated and expressed.
That is, I'm absolutely going to look that up because my younger gets a little hot kind of fast. And I dig, like, by the way, bravo, like, big parenting high five, like, to not just say, hey, it'll come around, sometime we'll have fun, but to effectively, and here's a word that I didn't learn, gosh, until like, 6 years ago, compersion.
I don't know what that word is, but I love it.
Oh,
what's it mean?
Compersion is the joy that you feel in someone else's joy.
Ah!
Why don't we know this word for our whole lives?
Word.
That's what, because you're like, hey, we might not be feeling good now because we're not drawing well, but their game is going great. They are feeling great. Feel good for their joy.
Yes.
And I'm like, compersion is the opposite of jealousy? How is it that we all know the word jealousy and none of us know the word compersion growing up? It's a wonderful concept. And once you have a word to hang it on, it's so much easier to work it into your life. Yeah. Is somebody here in the chat says it's like reverse Schadenfreude. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
But that's a great thing. Self-care, imposter syndrome. You mentioned doing good things and doing good self-talk. I bullet journal recently.
Yes.
And I do it with some people. And the thing that they incorporate into their bullet journaling that I don't, and I know they get a huge benefit out of it, is, first off, I love having the list and crossing things off. But
it's the best.
It's the best. But and it's a great mindfulness tool, and I use it for all these things, but something they do that I don't, and I know I suffer for it, they make lists of things that they have done that are good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and that's like effectively doing their good self-talk. It's like, here's a list of everything that I did today that was good. Not just, here's all the stuff that I had to do, and I did 8 out of 15, so I'm half not shitty. They're like, here's a deliberate list. It's like, I hung out with a friend today. I got in some exercise. Here's my good things list.
That's really important for guys like us who are writers, because we spend so much of our time alone.
Yes.
We spend so much of our time in our heads. And, when you're in it, you don't exist in the world that we share with our loved ones. You're in your world.
Yeah.
When I was working on my novel, I lived in 1983 for a year. Like, that's just where I was. And it is so easy to get into that place, and also to have those days, and I know that you've had them, where you work all day but you don't have anything to show for it.
Oh no.
we do things all day long that are part of being creative, and but at the end of the day, I can't go, well, I moved these things from here to here. Like I got this list down, and like we don't get to do that. And it's so important for us to remember that it might look to an outside observer like nothing's going on, but we really are getting a lot of work done.
It's something, and I always focus on the negative. I am hypercritical, and it makes me a misery to be around. But like nobody gets it worse than me because I never get away from myself.
Right.
But yeah, you're right, especially for some of these. It's one thing if I was moving bricks all day, I could point to the ones that were over there.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like writing for 8 hours, and at the end of it, you're like, I have 80 words less book.
I know.
It's like real hard to feel good about that day.
There's writers who do the word count. They write to the word count. I don't do that. I write for amount of time. It allows me to do my best work rather than trying to meet a semi-arbitrary number.
Yeah.
I keep the word count because it's nice, and I journal it. I put it up on Tumblr. It's a trick that I stole from Cory Doctorow. Like Cory just writes how many words he wrote that day, how many words he has total, and then sometimes a little bit about what he did that day. And for me, it was like an airlock back into the world. And I looked forward to cycling that airlock so much. I looked forward to looking back on what I had done and contextualizing it. And like Stephen King says, it's so important to write with the door closed. So it allows me to write with the door closed while passing a little note underneath it that says I'm still alive.
Yeah. So much of my revision process is so opaque. Like I remember back with Wise Man's Fear, I did spend an entire day writing, and I was working on a chapter where all of the dialogue was in metrical verse. And it was straight up 10 hours. And at the end of that day, I had changed about 15 words.
Yeah.
And then changed them back. And I was like,
yeah.
And it's like, so at the end of it, it's like I had done work. I had done my best. I had gone in. I'm like, here, this. Yeah, this. And then you look at it and like, no, we gotta undo that. Undo.
I bet it presented itself in something on a different day that you're not even aware of.
Oh, sure.
That work that you did that day made it possible to do work on a different day.
And it effectively built up my craft.
Yeah.
I mean, I was grinding that skill,
Yeah.
and it will bear fruit later. And
Yeah.
sometimes you got to do the useless work before you do the useful work. You got
a gold farm.
Yeah, you got to peel the apples before you make the pie. Making the pie is sexy. Peeling the apples sucks. So how about this? You mentioned imposter syndrome briefly. Any tips for, like, let's do quick tips about dealing with or being good about this stuff?
Yeah. I feel like a fraud talking about how to like not let imposter syndrome overwhelm you, because I live with imposter syndrome all the time, and I am friends with people like you and Scalzi and Mary and Joe Hill and Cory, who are all fabulously successful writers. I am friends with the cast of The Big Bang Theory, who are all fabulously successful actors. And I feel like the lyric "I'm worst at what I do best" was written just for me. And honestly, the way that I get through it, and it doesn't always work, but one of the tricks that I use to try to fool myself is I think about the people who believe in me. I think about the people I love who believe in me. I think about the people I love who support me when I'm struggling. And I feel like if I allow my imposter syndrome to overwhelm me, it's disrespectful to them.
Oh, wow.
In a way, it is turning my back on the people who love me. because the people who love me and believe me have stood by me and let me stand on their shoulders, and they've carried me and they've done everything to help me get to where I am. And I fucking deserve to be there. That's just, I mean, it's just like, Anne is the smartest, coolest, kindest person I know. She would not choose to spend her life with the person I sometimes think I am.
Yeah, sometimes it's way easier to trust somebody else. And for me, here's a different version of imposter syndrome. I for some whatever, I got lucky. I got over the publishing world imposter syndrome thing. But you know what I have now is I have imposter syndrome as I'm trying to make friends.
Sure.
And like that's real bad. It's real bad. Like I was out at this con and I'm hanging out with some people and I'm like, and one day I'm like, this is great and I like these people and they're cool and I really need some friends and this is nice and we're all, and then next day I'm like, oh boy, I had better get away from these people because they have tolerated me long enough, and it's embarrassing how long I have been here, and when I leave, they will say, thank Christ that Rothfuss, isn't here like the creepy uncle that shows up at your party.
I think it is really important when you have those feelings, and I have them too, but I think it's very important for anyone who has those feelings to remember the two words that Jenny Lawson put into the world that I lean on all the time. Depression lies.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wish that I had something that didn't feel like a platitude. But that's the truth, man. Like, if I can do this, anybody can do this.
Yeah. The one of the big things, and I'll say this to you, I'm going to give you guys advice. I got to start taking my own advice. I'll say to you guys out there, the biggest, best first step is if you can look at yourself, and I knew I was doing it yesterday, and I'm like, hey, you're just doing that thing. You're having imposter syndrome. You're being real down on yourself. You're having a bit of a snit. And because of your snit, now you're having a sulk. And then I started to beat myself up about it. I'm like, but at least I knew what I was doing was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't quite find my way out of it. And it didn't make me feel better. But that's like putting your foot on that step is at least, it's like, it's almost, it's like, okay, I can take that step eventually. Yeah. So awareness is better than nothing. It's not as comforting as figuring it out, but yeah. Will, I've kept you half an hour longer than I meant to.
Have I had this horrible zit in between my eyes the entire time I've been on this stream? I'm 46. Fuck this. I'm too old for this shit.
Mine's right here.
Okay, wait. Here, let me just pull my hat down.
Here, I'll move my beard so no one can see mine.
I would be delighted to spend a few minutes to address anything that comes out of the chat room, if you like.
Oh, yeah.
No pressure at all, no expectations, but I figure if people have endured listening to me talk about things that I think are important, I could at least spend a couple of minutes talking about things that actually matter to other people.
I will echo one. I saw something scroll by here that said that this is the best stream that I've ever done, which I feel real good about.
Oh, geez. Thanks.
Yeah. Somebody just saying, thank you so much for being open and honest. How to talk to your teens or adult kids about mental health? That's a great question.
That's a super great question. Those conversations, I think they start when they're small.
Yeah.
Because it's all about, what do you as a parent, what do you want to normalize? What do you want your kids to grow up just accepting, taking for granted. With our kids, for example, we told them from as soon as they could comprehend who people were, we wanted our kids to grow up being inclusive and tolerant, and we wanted them to know that if they were gay, we didn't have a problem with that, and that was totally normal. And it turned out that neither one of them are, but they have tons of friends who are, and they don't have anything weird with same-sex couples, the way that it still lingers even in Gen X, because that's the world that we grew up in, because our parents, in general, our parents' generation was really homophobic. I think that it is, so we start these conversations when they're young. The thing to remember about teenagers, this is so important, you gotta meet teenagers where they are. And what I mean is, when a teenager is dealing with something that is the biggest thing in their world, and you as a parent with bills and a job and an asshole boss and a marriage that needs attention and all of the things that we deal with as adults, when you look at your plate and then you look at their plate, it is, it's too many parents. My parents would do this, just minimize it and blow it off. Like, well, what's happening to you isn't real. Fuck that. It's real.
Yeah.
It's absolutely real. And I think it is extraordinarily important to listen without judgment to what your kids are going through, and then help them the best that you can. Communicate with them. You wanted to know, like, how would you communicate and talk about mental health with kids? I think step one is acknowledging that mental illness is no different from physical illness. We would never make our kids just power through a broken bone. We would take them to get help for it. And I think that when we talk about mental health in the same way, it removes the stigma from kids and it allows them to be open about it. It's also really important to acknowledge, I think, how a teenager is feeling. And then we as adults have to know that their experience is limited. Their world experience is limited. And kind of have to let them fall down and skin their knees sometimes.
That's the super hardest thing about being a parent for me.
It's so hard.
Let them fuck up.
But it's how they learn.
It's how anyone learns anything about anything.
You have to let them touch the hot stove, and then you got to tell them, don't touch the hot stove. It's going to burn. And then eventually they're going to touch the hot stove. And then you have to go, that's why I told you not to touch it. Do you leave me now? Like that's, and then like, I think it's really, really important to put yourself in the position that they are in. Remember what you were doing as a teenager and own it.
Yeah.
You a shit? Were you a fuck up? Were you experimenting with alcohol and drugs? You gotta own it. You have to be honest, because if you're not, you lose your credibility, and your credibility with your children is going to be so important when they are late teens, early 20s, getting out into the world, starting to question things, starting to realize that all they know is what they were taught, which might not necessarily be the unvarnished truth.
Yep.
Do you want them to come to you? Do you want to have a role in your child's transition to adulthood, or do you want them to go to someone else because they've realized that they can't talk to you about the things that are important to them?
Yeah.
And make your choice.
Yeah.
Make your choice right now. Do you have babies? Make that choice now. Have you been doing, like, I doubt very much anyone listening to this is done because I'm the mommy, that's why, or I doubt very much anyone listening or watching this has said, like, because I said so. I know that sometimes kids get. Well, I was just going to say, when the kids get into that endless Ouroboros of why, that sometimes the only way to break it is like, just fucking because, shut up. But like, there is unreal important things. When your kid gets their heart broken, let them have their broken heart.
Yeah. Yep.
And love them through it. Don't minimize it.
Yeah.
Don't tell them there's going to be somebody else, because they don't feel that in that moment.
They don't want to hear that right then.
A thing that I've learned, like, this is what helps me more than anything else when I'm having a shitty day, is when someone says to me, that really sucks, and I know that really sucks, and I'm sorry. Sometimes that's all I need.
Sometimes you can't fix it. All you can do is listen and be compassionate. One thing that I've done, and this is I bring in from my teacher days, if he comes at me and he's like this happened, and I'm like, there's the desire to always be the authority, to have the answers, because I always want him to think that he can come to me. But of course I don't have all the answers. And as a teacher, I gave that up a long time ago because I taught with a decentered classroom.
Yeah.
And if they see you as too much of an authority, the students don't work towards learning. They just look to you for answers. But answers are useless. You need to learn how to figure out answers. That's what being educated is. And so when my boys come to me, one of the best things I know how to say, one of my defaults, one of my chambered up phrases that I try to fall back on is, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. And then it's like, well, how do you think we can fix this? And if they say, I don't know, I say, I don't know either. Let's figure this out. And then I take them with me on the journey of, like, maybe we read a book, maybe we do some research, maybe we ask someone, maybe we do 3 or 4 things, and maybe don't come up with any great answers. But what they've learned is, first off, you'll always end up with a little distance from whatever was bugging you. Second off, you've taken action, which always feels good. And they've learned where to go maybe the next time they want to start trying this on their own. They learn there are things you can do to try to figure it out. And
they've done it together with you.
Yeah.
That's really important.
That's
really, really important.
Yeah.
Like you have led them on a little bit of a quest, and you went through it together, and they will remember that. It builds your credibility.
Yeah. Oh, and here's somebody
strengthens your bond.
Somebody had an interesting thing here. It says, isn't that a little like lying to them, though, if you do have an idea of the answer? And here's my answer to that. I'll take it back to a different thing, a mechanistic thing, so you can see how it works. I remember watching my eldest, Oot. He is maybe 18 months old, and he wanted to help cook. And 18 months old, like, you're just bad at everything, right? You're useless.
You're peak tiny drunk human at 18 months old.
Yes. Like, standing up is real A+, you know?
Yeah.
And so he's standing on a chair. He's at the kitchen counter, and he wants to help cut potatoes. And this is a great project because you really, like, oh no, you fucked up a potato. You can't fuck up a potato.
Right.
And you give him a butter knife. You can kind of cut a little bit, but you can't hurt yourself with that.
Yeah.
And I watch him doing it, and he's doing it real bad. And it would be real easy for me to say, oh, sweetie, hold it like this. Or, oh, sweetie, flip the potato over and cut it here. Or, oh, sweetie, here, let me help you. And the desire to help is good. It is one of the best of the desires. It shows that you're a good human. If you feel that way, great. However, knowing how to best help, and when best help is no help, that is a real tricky thing. That, again, I've had experience with as a teacher, really made being a parent easier in that regard, because I watched Sarah, and Sarah saw what was happening, and she was like, had mom hands like coming in there, and I was out of his sight. I'm like, wait. And what he learned wasn't to cut a potato, because that's not what's important. What he learned is he kind of did it and was frustrated, and then eventually he tried a different thing, and it didn't work, and he was frustrated. And then he tried a different thing, and that kind of worked. What he was learning is to deal with failure, and I'm really proud of this moment. It wasn't like he failed, and then I went, oh, here, let me take care of that for you. Because what they learned then is if you fail once, you've kind of fucked up and somebody's going to take it away from you.
Right.
He learned that failure is the natural state of doing anything.
Yeah.
And you feel a little frustrated, and that's okay. And you learn how to deal with that, and that's great. And eventually, like, you figure out the tricks that work. The reason I'm good at cutting potatoes is I've done it 100 times.
Right.
He's got to do it at least a dozen before he just stops sucking. And I got
Also, at 18 months old, he probably doesn't have the best coordination and fine muscle movement control.
He got none of that. And that's
Yeah.
how you get it, is by getting in there and being big drunk baby is the best, because he's like, it is.
Yeah.
He cut that potato exactly the way I would have, with like a fifth of gin in me, and it's like, yeah. And so doing that when they're young, it's not lying to them. I know how to cut a potato, but me withholding that information isn't a lie, and it isn't a deception. It's an opportunity for them to learn how to learn. And similarly, with an older child, if they come to you and they're like, I got into a fight with Jeremy, and he said that there's the Marinara Trench is the biggest trench in the ocean, and I said that it was the Marianas Trench, and then we got in a fight, then we got in trouble, and we had a timeout, and I think I'm right. And I'm like, well, do you want to try to figure out which one is the right way of saying that? And then he's like, sure. And then we can find, I could just say, oh, by the way, it's this. But that's...
Yeah, your friend's an idiot.
Yeah, that's not, it's like, let's figure out how to figure it out together.
Yeah.
I'm not lying or being deceptive or being manipulative just by not giving them everything. In a matter of fact, one of the best gifts you can give your developing child is the opportunity to fail, the opportunity to be frustrated, the opportunity to have to figure things out, and for things to be hard sometimes.
Oh shoot! My head lost it. It'll come back around. Oh, to that person who asked how to talk to teenagers. Look up and practice a technique called active listening.
Yes.
It is the number one way to communicate with adolescents.
Yeah. And it's real good with almost everyone. Double good with teens.
Yeah.
And it's very contrary to what a lot of us are taught in the culture, especially maybe if you're a dude.
Yep.
Especially maybe if you're a white dude who's real fond of the sound of his own voice, who also is a teacher and a parent.
Yep.
And he goes to a lot of conventions, and he's got a real stirring baritone, and people really want to hear what he thinks on a lot of subjects.
I feel like you're talking about a person I know. Are you talking about Neil Gaiman?
He's not a baritone.
I'm sorry.
You're
right, he's not.
Don't take away the one thing I have over Neil Gaiman.
Are you talking about Sanderson?
Oh, okay.
We have fun.
We do have fun. Will, this has been such a treat for me. There have been some other good questions. Oh, I think one, maybe a good capper for this.
Okay.
Because a lot of people have been saying, man, I got into therapy. First off, I'll just make the straight up statement and say, if you go to a therapy and it's bad, it might not be therapy that's bad. It might be that therapist is bad, or maybe just isn't a good fit for you. It's sort of like if you went on a date and it was bad, you probably shouldn't just throw the whole concept out the window right there.
This is this thing that happens with mental health medications as well. If for most people it doesn't work the very first time, the first thing you try doesn't match up with your brain chemicals. It's gotten a lot better in recent years than it was 10 or 15 years ago even. But it's super important when you're seeking help to trust your doctor, take your meds. If you don't feel that they're working, go to a follow-up appointment and your doctor will switch them and you'll try something new. And it can be a moderately to fairly unpleasant experience while your brain gets used to it, but it's super worth it. It's super, super, super worth it. it is really really important. I say this every time, whenever I talk about mental health. If you're taking your meds and you're feeling great and you're like, I don't need the meds anymore, stop. That's
Stop.
wrong.
Wrong.
That's absolutely not right. Set that idea on fire, bury it in the backyard, and put salt over it, because the meds are working, and that's why you feel like you don't need them.
Yeah. So here's, I think, a great one, and this is good to end on, because a lot of people in here are singing the praises of therapy. Somebody here said, what if your therapist isn't terrible, but they're not great? I would say you deserve a therapist that's great. Shop around.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that.
But
And also, don't be worried about your financial situation stopping you from sitting down with a mental health professional. Nearly all mental health professionals will work on a sliding scale for you. So if all you can afford is $10, great, they'll take $10 from you. Like, I cannot say this enough. They have dedicated their lives to helping people. They have dedicated their lives to helping people like us who need their experience and their insight. And when you know how good it feels when you can do the thing that you're good at, you know how good it feels when you get to do, whether it's a job or a hobby, whatever it is that you love, you know how good it feels to practice that. They're practicing that, and they know that they're helping you, and they are willing to work on a sliding scale, because it's almost like it's doing that is kind of, as I understand it, is kind of part of fulfilling the therapist's version of the Hippocratic Oath.
And somebody here jumped in and said, as a therapist, thank you for saying that. This is one of my most asked questions. People clash all the time, and therapists are no different. It's okay to tell your therapist that you don't think you fit well with them and ask for referral to a different therapist, because like, they're not idiots, and this is not their first rodeo. They don't want you to be in there unhappy and not getting productive work done. They want to take that time of theirs and do better work with someone they're a better fit with, and they want you to do good work with somebody else.
Let me add a thing about going to therapy.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, please hear this, people in the world. You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to be honest with your therapist. Even if you feel like it makes you the bad guy in a story, even if you feel like it's embarrassing, or like if you have that internalized sense of shame that our culture has put on people who are seeking help, even if you feel all of those things, it is so important to be honest, because that's the only way you're going to get the help that you need. Think about it this way. You train for a marathon. You enter the race. You do all the work to get to the starting line. And then you cheat and you go from mile 3 to mile 26.
Right.
What was the point of any of that? Why did you do it? Why did you go through any of why did you go through all the hard part? Honestly, the hardest part about going to a therapist is making the call.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
And that's what
that is really the hard part.
Saying here, like, how do you do that? How do you do that? If you have depression, how do you work up to making if you have anxiety, how do you do it? I have a tip, but do you have anything first?
Yeah. So I have created a construct in my mind where me right now and me in the future are different people. Oh. Future me deserves to be happy. Future me deserves every opportunity to have a great day. Future me deserves to feel good about the way he looks. Future me deserves to feel good about the choices he's made. Future me deserves to come out into a clean kitchen in the morning. I'm not going to make future me have a bad day because current me is having a bad day. It's not fair to him. So I think about me from the future, and I know things like me from the future is going to be really happy that he went to hang out with his friends tonight. Me from the future is going to be really happy that I didn't eat midnight cheese, whatever it is. And that's my trick. And it doesn't work for everybody, but it has really worked for me. I just think like me from right now is not feeling like doing this, but like me from the future, like why should he be dragged down because me right now is feeling I describe depression as like that lead apron they put on you at the dentist when they take your X-rays. That's how it physically feels on me, except it's draped over my entire reality. And like me from the future doesn't need to wear that. Like maybe I can just not put it on him. So that's doesn't always work. It saying that it almost feels a little glib, but that's the trick that works for me. What's your trick?
I recently, because I've been in therapy and I love it, I lost my therapist. He retired, which great for him, but sucks for me because we had a great rapport going. And so I had a couple other friends who had been in and weren't anymore, but one of them was like, maybe I should get in again. And the other one was obviously was not doing very well either. And so like we had a Skype call and we were talking about stuff and I'm like, I know I need a new therapist. Do you need to get in, talk to somebody too? Things are shitty lately. And so we teamed up and we started looking at them online together, and we were sharing some resources back and forth. And so like sometimes those things that it seems so impossible to do by yourself, like agreeing to do them with another person, it's like I could excuse it if I was helping facilitate somebody else getting what they needed.
Great, yeah.
And what was really galling is that both of these people were like, doodle-doodle-loop, doodle-loop, search. Okay, cool. Yeah, now I have an appointment next Thursday. And I'm like, hold on. I have 50 tabs open on my browser and I'm reading 50 profiles. How did you find someone? Because I'm so obsessive and I want to find always the perfect solution. But find a buddy. Get a therapy finder buddy. Do it with a partner, with a friend, and that ended up working for me. Or saying to somebody, "Hey, I really need to get a therapist, and I cannot manage it by myself. Can you help me out?" And like, yeah, and if it's the right sort of friend, they'll probably say something like, "What would be helpful?" And then maybe you just sit down at the computer together and you look around. Any step is a step forward.
And when you're entering therapy, it's not something that resolves itself in one or even two or even 5 sessions. It's a process.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's absolutely okay. Think of it this way. If there's a hobby that you love, I don't know, like you like to sculpt things or whatever. Like I like to paint, right? I have to practice, right? I have to practice and I have to practice consistently so that my muscles get trained, so that my eye gets trained, so that my confidence and skills develop. It's the same thing with therapy. You have to practice it. You go consistently for a certain amount of time. And then eventually there comes a point where you don't need to go all the time.
Yeah.
And then there will become a time where you haven't had to go for a while and you'll go into crisis. Like I've been in a grief crisis and I've needed to go again. And it's really great. And I've been really happy for it. I'm really glad, really glad that I'm doing it. But it is not like I was saying earlier, like it's hard and that's okay.
Yeah. And sometimes you get into therapy, and I had a friend went into therapy and they were miserable because they were digging up more stuff. Sometimes it's sort of like, think of it like exercise. If you go in, you start exercising, you don't walk out of that first week being like, hey, now I feel, you walk out of that first week, you're like, my whole body hurts in places I forgot I had.
Yeah.
This sucks the most.
That's also me waking up in my mid-40s.
So like sticking with it a while is essential. And it's just, like eating healthy or building any good habit, you got to give it a while. I will admit my new therapy, part of me is like, ugh, I've met with them like 5 times. Why aren't I on top of this shit yet? I'm like, well, because there were 3 times maybe you should have been there and you had to skip that one because you were busy, Pat, and maybe you haven't been doing your self-work. Also, things are busy and you gotta put in your time. It's not going to fix itself in 2 months.
I want to share with people who are listening something that my psychiatrist retired. So my psychiatrist retired, my new psychiatrist, and my talk therapist all agree with the following statement.
Ooh.
For those of you who are listening to this, I imagine we share a relatively similar morality and set of ethics and values. For people like us, the last 2 years have been really hard. It has been depressing. It has been the source of tremendous anxiety. It's been overwhelming. For a lot of us, it's been profoundly triggering, and it's been really hard. I asked all three of those people, how much of what I am feeling is unique to me because my brain is a little wonky, and how much is like just how shitty the world is. And every single one of them said that 100% of their patients are experiencing the same kind of stress and anxiety and depression and frustration that I am experiencing. It's really, really, really normal. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And it doesn't mean that you are being overly dramatic to be triggered by gaslighting and abuse, just to pick two things that trigger me. And it's really okay to go in and talk to somebody because you haven't felt this way before, but you really feel this way now.
Yeah.
It's almost like we are suffering through a terrible infection, and we have to go see a doctor to get help for it, to help our bodies fight it off, to help us learn how to like live through it and get better. And we have to remember it's not forever.
Yep. Will, I can't think of a better capper on this. You've been so generous with your time, and everyone in the chat has been just, doing the equivalent of preach, hallelujah.
I'm really glad to know that.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to know that. I was talking to a friend of mine who's super successful and like legitimately famous, and we were talking about what we do when we're not at work, and I was saying, like, what I care about is taking advantage of the privilege that I have to help people. And she said, I love the work and I love the freedom that it brings me, but it is doing things that help people that matters to me. That's what brings things into my life. I'm really happy to have spent this time with you. And I'm really glad to know that that some of the stuff that fell out of my brain today maybe landed on people in a way that was helpful or validating or somehow was maybe a little bit of a lift to somebody who needed it. And I thank you for sharing. I don't have a chat window open here. I just have you on Skype. So I'm not seeing that. So I'm really happy to know that.
No,
thank you.
It's been many of those things to many, many people. We've actually also had some really kind of delightfully high numbers. We've been hovering around 800-900 people all this time.
Wow, that's awesome.
And
please support Worldbuilders, you guys. Remember that we're here.
Oh yeah, yep. Also Worldbuilders, jump in. We're going to be doing prize drawings as soon as I log off with Will. And if you donate, you're still eligible for all of today's drawings as well as all of the big drawings at the end. But no, this is lovely. And then I'm gonna snip this out and make it its own video and post it up online so other people can see it. And I don't doubt that there will be thousands and thousands. When we did this with Mercer and Holly Conrad, people watched it just for years since then. So
Oh, I want to be gross and tell people to keep an eye open for my novel then.
yeah.
Like, my first fiction novel is called All We Ever Wanted Was Everything, and it's a semi-autobiographical coming of age story set in 1983. I don't know who the publisher is. We're shopping it right now, but it'll be out next year, and I'm really excited about it. And I know that the only way that people know about our things is when we tell them about it. So I'm just that was my bit of being gross
good
and just
job.
telling
No,
that
no,
that
that's
exists.
exactly right. That's exactly right. And I mean, not to. I'm saying I'm looking forward to it too because I get to take a peek at it as soon as I have eaten my vegetables. By which I mean to say, finish my fundraiser. That is going to be queued up on my to be read pile, and I get to peek at it. Not that. Not to tease y'all on the internet about that, but I've read a bunch of Will's stuff, and he is to be frank, an irritatingly good author. Because when
Thanks.
when I
That's going on my bio. An
you can
irritatingly good author, Matt Roth.
irritatingly good right on the book itself. The and can I mention, like, this is totally off topic, but this is just for me. I'm watching Next Generation with my little boys,
Yeah.
and I'm seeing it with such fresh eyes. It's been ages, and I've read a lot about kind of what you were going through during the show in one way or another. It is such a joy to me to watch this show. It was such a joy to me as a child. It was so good for me as a child. Like, because I was exactly your age. We're kind of the same age. So it came out and I'm like, oh shit, a smart kid who likes science, and nobody makes fun of him for it. What a groundbreaking idea. And my boys are watching it too, and they think
awesome.
And they think Wesley is a baller. And you know why?
That.
Because he is. And it's
that's so cool.
It's so cool to watch that with him. Also, I get to, like, you come out and I'm like that's my friend Will.
I have a friend who has been watching it with their kid, and their kid only knows me now as an adult with a beard. So their kid thought I was Riker.
Oh, that's great.
And couldn't understand, and we're like, he looked so different. And my friend's like, well, that's because he was much younger. And it wasn't until they had watched a lot that they realized, that my friend realized, their kid was mistaking me for Frakes.
Wow. Also, for all of you who watched Flash Gordon, the reason that I looked so different there is because I was younger back when I was Brian Blessed.
And you were a pro football player?
Yeah. Oh no, not Flash. Prince Voltan. Okay. All
right.
I
must have a European cut.
Okay. I am for real going to let you go. Thank you again. I've kept you so much longer than I meant to. And I'll let you go. Everybody on the stream, you stick around. We're going to put a bow on this. I will talk to you later, Will. And
okay,
I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.